This is the longest I've ever spent on a video. I've rewritten the script 7 times, I've recorded it 4 times, and every time I thought I was done, I played GTA 4 again and realized I missed something. Because this game isn't just another crime story, it's a mirror. One that forces you to look at how people rebuild themselves after they've already fallen apart. Everyone remembers GTA 4 for its realism, or the driving physics, or that muted brown skyline, but beneath all of that, there's something deeper. Something I think most of us felt, even if we didn't have the words for it back then. It's the weight of people who've already lost too much, still trying to find a reason to keep going. That's what makes a story so special. It's not about becoming powerful, it's about becoming human again, in a city that punishes you for even trying. Nico isn't a hero. He's not even a criminal in the traditional sense. He's a man running from guilt, chasing closure that doesn't exist. And every person he meets, Roman, Brucey, Michelle, Dwayne, Jacob, the McCrearys, they're all doing the same thing in their own ways. They're coping, they're surviving, they're pretending. Roman hides behind optimism because reality scares him. Brucey hides behind bravado because silence does. Michelle hides behind control because vulnerability feels safe, and Nico hides behind work because it's easier than feeling. Rockstar didn't write stereotypes, they wrote survival strategies, and that's the key to understanding the story. It's not about what these people do, it's about why they do it. That's why GTA 4 still stands apart even now. It's not about chaos, it's about aftermath. It's not about power, it's about the cause of chasing it. And it's not about the American dream, it's about waking up from it. So this isn't a recap of the plot, it's a breakdown of people, how trauma shapes them, how guilt drives them, and how every single one of them reflects a different way of coping with the pain. How ambition becomes avoidance, and how redemption doesn't always mean forgiveness. Because if there's one thing this game understood better than almost anything else, it's that sometimes surviving isn't strength, it's habit. Nico arrives in Liberty City with 2 things, a promise and a lie. The promise comes from Roman, a cousin living the so-called American dream. The lie is that this dream ever existed in the first place. When Nico steps off that cargo ship, you can see it in his face. This isn't excitement, it's fatigue. He's not looking at a new world, he's scanning it, assessing it, like a soldier walking enemy territory. That's the first sign that GTA 4 is doing something different. This isn't the story of a man chasing opportunity, it's a story of a man trying to escape memory. Nico's past is left mostly unsaid, but you feel it in everything he does. The way he speaks softly, the way his eyes linger when someone mentions loyalty or betrayal. Those aren't narrative quirks, they're tells, they're trauma responses. He's been through a war, and it didn't just take people he loved, it rewired him. He's learned to live in survival mode where trust is a luxury and emotion is a liability. Roman, on the other hand, has built his entire identity on pretending. He's the counterweight to Nico's heaviness, constantly talking about women, money, success, but underneath the jokes and the optimism, you can feel the panic. He's not trying to thrive, he's trying to believe. Roman lies to Nico about having a mansion, cars, business connections. He paints the picture of a life that doesn't exist because he's terrified that if he stops pretending, he'll have to face how far from that dream he really is. That's denial, not as a flaw, but as a survival mechanism. Roman's delusion keeps him going, Nico's cynicism keeps him safe, and both of them are coping with the same thing, a life that didn't turn out the way they were promised. When Nico arrives at Roman's tiny apartment and realizes the truth, there's no explosion of anger, just quiet disappointment. That's the tone this game sets from the start. Muted, real, painfully human. In most games, this would be played as comedy. In GTA 4, it feels like heartbreak. Liberty City doesn't care who you are when you show up. It just takes your expectations, strips them bare, and hands you back reality. The city isn't welcoming, it's indifferent. It doesn't reward ambition, it exposes it. And in that way, Liberty City becomes a perfect reflection of Nico's psychology. Every street, every siren, every sleepless night echoes the noise in his own head. It's fast, it's loud, it never stops because if it did, he'd have to think. That's the real reason Nico takes every job, every dangerous opportunity. He says he needs money, but it's more than that. He needs distraction. He needs to feel busy because stillness means memory. It's the same cycle so many people fall into after trauma. You mistake motion for progress. You fill your life with noise just to avoid that silence. And the silence always comes back. The brilliance of his opening act is how subtle it is. The game never tells you any of this directly, but it doesn't have to. The tone, the performances, the city itself, they all say what words can't. Rockstar built Liberty City not as a sandbox, but as a psychological environment, a place where every decision Nico makes feels like an attempt to rewrite his past, even when it's clear that he can't. That's why this section is so much more memorable than people expect. It's not about getting revenge yet or power or reputation, it's about a man trying to start over while carrying everything he swore he left behind. You can't rebuild a life on top of something you never buried, and Nico never buried anything. At first, Nico truly takes jobs because he has to. He needs money, a place to stay, and some way to help Roman get out of debt, but pretty quickly it stops being about survival and starts becoming about something else. It becomes habit. Nico's not just doing jobs anymore, he's staying busy. He's constantly driving, shooting, meeting, planning, and if you pay attention, he never sits still unless a story forces him to. That's not ambition, that's avoidance. there's a kind of quiet tragedy in that. He's not chasing anything anymore, he's running laps around his own memories. Every mission, every favor, every deal is just one more reason not to think about the past. It's what a lot of people do after they've been through something heavy. You convince yourself that staying in motion means you're moving forward. You feel every hour so you don't have to deal with the ones that hurt. And that's exactly what Nico's doing, turning chaos into routine because he doesn't know what calm feels like anymore. And then there's Jacob, one of the few people who don't demand anything from him. Jacob is grounded in a way that others aren't. He doesn't judge, he doesn't manipulate, he just listens. He's chaos proof. The world around him is wild, but he stays still inside of it. That's why his friendship with Nico matters so much. Jacob gives him something stable, something real. He reminds Nico what loyalty feels like when it isn't transactional. Jacob doesn't try to fix him, he just sees him. And for someone who's been treated like a weapon his whole life, that means everything. Then there's Brucey, who couldn't be more different. Brucey is noise, pure energy and insecurity wrapped together in a gold chain and protein powder. He's constantly yelling about success, power, dominance, all while his voice cracks under the pressure. He's the guy who tries to manifest confidence by faking it louder than anyone else. That's his coping mechanism. His whole alpha male routine isn't arrogance, it's fear. Fear that if he ever stops performing, he'll have to face how small he actually feels. And Rockstar writes him that way intentionally. Brucey isn't a parody of gym culture or hypermasculinity. He's what happens when validation becomes survival. When self-worth depends entirely on how loudly you can convince people you're winning. It's a different kind of avoidance than Nico's, but it's built on the same foundation, pain you refuse to look at. You start to realize that's what every character in GTA 4 has in common. They're all avoiding something. Responsibility, regret, truth. The entire city is full of people who can't stop moving because the second they do, they'll have to face who they've become. That's why Liberty City feels so alive and so empty at the exact same time. It's always buzzing, always moving, but no one in it ever really changes, because motion without direction isn't growth, it's distraction. And Nico's caught right in the middle of that. He tells himself he's doing just what he needs to do, but deep down, he knows he's feeding the same machine that broke him in the first place. That's the quiet genius of the first part of this game. There's no dramatic turning point, just slow erosion. Every favor he takes, every bullet he fires, every lie he tells himself, it's one more step towards becoming the kind of person he swore he wouldn't be. Avoidance becomes behavior, behavior becomes identity, and before he even realizes it, Nico isn't avoiding his past anymore, he's creating it. At some point in the story, survival stops feeling like desperation and starts feeling like control. That's the trap Nico falls into, the illusion that if he can manage the chaos, he can manage the pain. It's a dangerous kind of logic, and that's where Dimitri enters the picture. Dimitri is calm, rational, professional, at least on the surface. He doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't threaten openly, he just gives you choices that don't feel like choices at all. To someone like Nico, that's intoxicating. After so much instability, Dimitri feels like order. He represents the first person in the city who seems to understand the structure, how to build something, how to keep it running, but it's a facade. Dimitri's not building anything, he's controlling it. He studies people, figures out what they want, and then uses it to own them. He gives Nico exactly what he craves, direction, and that's how he starts to shape him, not by force, but by purpose. Nico's trauma makes him predictable. People who've lived through chaos tend to seek familiarity even if it's toxic. That's why Dimitri's manipulation works. He offers Nico a system, a routine, something that feels safe, but it's a system built on exploitation. Every favor Dimitri asks for chips away at Nico's sense of morality. It's slow, almost invisible at first. You can tell Nico knows something's off, but he goes along with it anyways. That's the part that hurts the most, watching him participate in his own corruption because he doesn't know how to live without taking orders. Then there's Michelle, or Karen depending on when you find out who she really is. She's another version of the same theme. On the outside, she's kind, curious, and grounded. Someone who might finally offer Nico real connection, but that connection turns out to be surveillance. She isn't lying because she enjoys it, she's lying because it's the only way she knows how to be safe. Her job requires her to observe, not feel. That's what makes her betrayal sting, not because she fooled Nico, but because she's exactly like him. Someone who's been taught that control is safer than vulnerability. When both of these betrayals happen, Dimitri and Michelle's, you realize what GTA 4 is actually doing. It's not building villains, it's building parallels. Each person in Nico's life is a reflection of a coping mechanism, and every time one fails, he's forcing in front a piece of himself. This is also where the tone of the game shifts. The optimism of the early chapters fades into something quieter and colder. The city doesn't change, but Nico does. He stops reacting with emotion and starts reacting with efficiency. He's no longer killing out of anger, he's killing out of habit. He's replacing uncertainty with action, pain with motion, guilt with purpose. It's the same survival instinct that got him through the war, except now it's turning him into someone he doesn't recognize. That's what makes his act so quietly devastating. There's no single moment where Nico becomes bad, it's gradual, a slow erosion of conscience, one compromise at a time, and before you even realize it, the man who wanted to escape his past life has rebuilt it perfectly, piece by piece. Control gives him comfort, but it also takes everything else away. And the worst part, he doesn't even realize it's happening. After Dimitri's betrayal, something changes in Nico. He doesn't rage, he doesn't fall apart, he just hardens. It's a kind of reaction that comes from someone who's been through this before. Someone who's learned that outrage doesn't stop pain, it just burns faster. So instead, he does what trauma survivors often do. He goes back to what he knows: violence, movement, obligation. Those things are familiar, predictable, safe in their own way, and that's where the spiral begins. Nico starts taking more jobs, not because he wants to, but because the silence between them feels unbearable. He becomes dependent on the structure that chaos provides. It's ironic. The very thing destroying him is what keeps him functional. That's the psychology of dependency. It's not always about drugs or money. Sometimes it's about the emotional patterns we can't let go of because they give our pain a schedule. For Nico, every mission becomes a way to keep him from thinking too long. Meanwhile, Roman is unraveling. The cracks in his optimism are starting to show. The big talk about success and happiness is now replaced by panic and debt. He's not pretending as well as he used to, and you can hear it in his voice. He's trying to hold everything together, but deep down he knows it's all collapsing. That's the tragedy of their relationship. Both cousins think they're helping each other, but really, they're just enabling different forms of denial. Roman keeps lying to protect hope. Nico keeps fighting to protect control. Neither of them are healing. They're just maintaining the illusion that they still can. And through all of this, Liberty City becomes something new. It's not a city of dreams anymore, it's a system of dependency. Everyone here needs something from someone else, and every favor has a cost. The city feeds on needs. It gives you just enough to stay alive and then takes more when you get comfortable. That's how trauma works too. It convinces you that you're making progress when really you're just surviving better. For Nico, every new connection starts to blur the line between trust and transaction. He doesn't know how to separate kindness from expectation anymore. If someone helps him, he wonders what they want. If someone loves him, he waits for them to leave. It's the mindset of someone who's lived too long in fight or flight. Even when the danger's gone, your body doesn't believe it. And in Nico's world, the danger never really is gone. That's why this part of the story hits so quietly hard. There's no big turning point, no explosion, no redemption, it's just fatigue, emotional exhaustion disguised as discipline. By the time Nico meets new people and gets pulled deeper into the underworld, he's no longer trying to start over. He's trying to stay busy enough to forget that starting over ever mattered. This is the point in GTA 4 where the player feels it too. The missions start to blur together, the favors, the errands, the hits. You start to feel the same numbness that Nico feels. You keep playing not because you believe in the goal, but because stopping would mean sitting in silence with everything that's happened. That is the literal genius of this chapter. It's not about escalation, it's about erosion. Watching someone lose themselves so slowly, so quietly that they don't even notice. When Dwayne enters a story, he doesn't look like a threat or an ally, he just looks tired. There's a heaviness to him, the kind of weight that doesn't come from the years he's lived, but from what those years took away. Dwayne is a man defined by regret. He spent so long in prison that time outside doesn't make sense anymore. The world kept moving, but he didn't. And when he finally steps back into it, he realizes that everything he used to believe in, loyalty, power, friendship, doesn't exist the same way it used to. He talks about the old days like they're a myth, and in a way, they are. Dwayne's entire identity is built around who he was, not who he is. That's what makes him one of the most psychologically rich characters in GTA 4. He's what happens when a person's past becomes their home, a place they can't live in but refuse to leave. You can feel it in his voice. He's not angry, he's not even bitter, he's just empty. There's no fire left, just ashes. And that's exactly what draws Nico to him. Because on some level, Nico recognizes that same emptiness in himself. He looks at Dwayne and sees a warning. What happens when survival stops having a purpose? Both men are haunted by betrayal, by loss, by guilt. Both of them built their lives around pain. The difference is, Dwayne stopped running from it. He just let it consume him. That's what makes their relationship so powerful. It's not friendship, it's recognition. Two broken men seeing themselves in each other and realizing they're both still trapped in that same loop. Dwayne represents what Nico fears most: stagnation. The idea that you could live through everything, survive it all, and still end up alone, forgotten, and meaningless. It's the kind of fear that doesn't come from dying, it comes from living without a purpose. Dwayne is the embodiment of learned helplessness. When you've experienced so much loss that you stop believing effort can change anything. He's not lazy or weak, he's just numb. And that numbness is contagious. You can see Nico's empathy struggling against his own detachment in every conversation they have. He wants to help Dwayne, but he also wants to avoid seeing what Dwayne represents. Because every minute he spends around him is a reminder that his story, the violence, doesn't lead anywhere good. What's genius about Rockstar's writing here is that Dwayne isn't just a side character, he's a psychological checkpoint, a reflection of what Nico is slowly becoming without even realizing it, and all that leads to one of the most defining choices in the entire game: Dwayne or Playboy X. It's not just a choice between two lives, it's a choice between two futures. Do you side with the man trapped in his past or the man pretending to have outgrown it? Do you choose regret or denial? Neither option feels good because both are built on pain. Killing Playboy X is a rejection of arrogance, but it's also mercy towards someone who's already given up. Killing Dwayne is removing a mirror, destroying a reminder of who you might become. It's one of those rare moments where the morality doesn't come from right or wrong, but from why you do what you do. It's psychological, not ethical. And no matter who you choose, Nico loses something, because both men are symbols, and you can't destroy one without inheriting a piece of the other. When the dust settles, Nico doesn't walk away stronger, he walks away quieter. He's starting to understand that no matter who you side with, you can't kill the part of yourself that connects to them. That's the point where regret stops being a possibility and starts becoming a companion. Playboy X is everything Dwayne isn't. He's confident, loud, dressed in designer clothes, surrounded by people, money, and status. He's the image of success, or at least that's what he wants you to believe. But when you look closer, it becomes clear that Playboy X is just as lost as Dwayne. He's not living, he's performing. Every conversation, every gesture, every flex of confidence feels like it's rehearsed. That's what denial looks like when it's disguised as ambition. Playboy X has an entire identity around what other people think of him. He's obsessed with perception, with appearing like he's transcended the pain that Dwayne still carries, but deep down, he's terrified that none of it means anything. The success, the fame, the power, all of it is built on sand. The more he gains, the emptier he feels. So, he keeps chasing more. That's how Rockstar captures the psychology of denial better than almost any other game I've seen. Because denial isn't just pretending things didn't happen, it's pretending they don't matter anymore. Playboy doesn't erase his past, he buries it under golden noise. When he talks to Nico about Dwayne, you can hear the insecurity bleeding through his words. He doesn't want to admit that Dwayne still matters, not to him, not to anyone. Because if Dwayne matters, then the past still matters. And if the past still matters, then maybe all this growth he's so proud of isn't growth at all. So he does what people in denial often do. He tries to destroy the reminder. He wants Dwayne gone, not because Dwayne's a threat, but because Dwayne's existence exposes his lie. Every time he sees him, he sees who he used to be. The hunger, the struggle, the humanity he traded away for status. Playboy's story is a study in identity disassociation, when the self you show the world becomes completely detached from the self you actually are. It's not evil, it's fear. He's terrified that if anyone sees the cracks, he'll lose everything. That's why his confidence feels fragile. He's loud because silence would kill him. He's flashy because stillness would reveal too much. In a way, he's the perfect embodiment of Liberty City itself. Ambitious, loud, shallow, and hollow at the core. A place that never stops bragging about what it has because it can't remember what it lost. And when it finally comes down to the choice between Dwayne and Playboy X, you realize Rockstar isn't asking you to choose between good and evil, they're asking you to choose between two forms of survival, nostalgia and denial. One man drowns in the past, the other tries to drown it out. Neither is free. If you kill Dwayne, you remove the reminder of what authenticity looks like. If you kill Playboy, you destroy the illusion of what success is supposed to be. Either way, Nico is left staring at the same truth. You can't reinvent yourself without reconciling what came before. That's why this section is so important. It isn't just about who lives or dies, it's about who learns and who refuses to. Dwayne and Playboy aren't enemies, they're a reflection of what happens when pain defines you and denial replaces growth. And the more Nico moves through these choices, the more you can feel his attachment growing. The spark is gone, the hope is gone. He's starting to understand that no matter what he chooses, everything here leads to the same place, emptiness. But there's still one last piece missing. The people who show what happens when trauma doesn't just affect one person, but an entire family, and that's where the McCreary's come in. When Nico meets the McCreary family, it's like stepping into a mirror that reflects everything broken about Liberty City, not through crime, but through blood. The McCreary's are the definition of inherited damage. They all grew up with the same rules, the same guilt, the same twisted version of morality, but each of them learned to cope with it differently. Packy jokes through everything. He uses humor as a shield. Every laugh, every sarcastic moment, it's all a distraction. He's seen too much to believe in hope, so he replaces it with irony. That's how he survives, by never taking anything seriously enough to get hurt. Then there's Derek, the brother drowning in addiction. He drinks to forget, but also to remember, because the truth is, he can't live without his guilt. He's the one who never stopped feeling it. He numbs himself not to escape, but to slow down the noise. You can see it in his posture, in his eyes. He's already half gone before you even meet him. Francis though, Francis is different. He copes by overcompensating. He hides behind religion and authority, using morality like armor. He preaches about doing the right thing, but it's all performance. He's trying to convince himself that power can wash away shame, but guilt doesn't care about rank. It just waits. And then there's Kate, the only one who hasn't completely surrendered to the family's curse. She doesn't drink, doesn't steal, doesn't play the same game. She holds on to faith not as control, but as compassion. Kate believes people can change, that forgiveness isn't weakness. And in a world like this, that almost makes her alien. She becomes a quiet center of the chaos, the small moment of stillness in a story built on noise. The brilliance of Rockstar's writing is how they show each McCreary as a psychological branch of the same trauma tree. Packy's humor, Derek's addiction, Francis's hypocrisy, Kate's faith. They're all different responses to the same thing, growing up in a world where morality was preached but never practiced. When Nico gets close to him, he doesn't just see another family, he sees patterns. He sees how pain can echo from one generation to the next, reshaping people who never had a choice. And that's where the story starts to connect Nico's trauma to something bigger. His past isn't unique, it's part of a cycle. Everywhere he goes, he finds people repeating the same mistakes, coping the same way, hiding behind the same masks. It's not just Nico's story, it's human nature. The McCreary's biggest moment, the bank heist, is where all of this converges. For a brief moment, everyone feels aligned. The adrenaline, the teamwork, the unity, it almost feels like a family again. For a few minutes, they find purpose in chaos, and that's what makes it tragic, because when the dust settles, that illusion disappears. The heist doesn't bring them closer, it just proves that violence is the only language they all still speak. Nico's place in that crew says everything. He doesn't belong to the McCreary's by blood, but emotionally, he fits perfectly. He's another product of inherited pain, not from family, but from the world itself, and being with them makes him realize something brutal. You can't build out of shared trauma. You can bond over pain, but you can't heal from it together if no one's willing to face it. That's what GTA 4 does so quietly well. It shows that trauma doesn't always make people cruel, sometimes it just makes them tired. And the McCreary's are exhausted, all of them. Too guilty to change, too ashamed to stop, and too afraid to imagine a life without the weight they've always carried. They show Nico that no matter how much you try to move on, you can't outrun the damage if you're still living inside it. In a world full of all this noise, Kate speaks softly, and that is exactly why she matters. When she enters Nico's story, it feels different. No manipulation, no hidden agenda, no performance, just presence. And in Liberty City, where every conversation is transactional, that alone feels radical. Kate doesn't see Nico as a criminal or a soldier or a man running from his past. She sees someone trying to be good, even when he doesn't believe he can be. She listens without trying to fix him. She asks questions but never demands answers. That might sound small, but for someone like Nico, it's life-changing. Because until now, everyone in his life has treated him like a tool or a threat, something to use or to fear. Kate just treats him like a person. And that's what makes her the emotional anchor of GTA 4. She represents the one thing Nico's been chasing without realizing it. The possibility of peace, not the illusion of peace that comes from revenge or money, the real kind. The quiet that comes from forgiveness, acceptance, and stillness, but Nico doesn't know what to do with that kind of quiet. He's built his entire existence around conflict. If he's not fighting someone else, he's fighting himself. So when someone finally offers him safety, it doesn't feel comforting, it feels foreign. That's what makes their relationship so fragile. Kate wants connection, Nico only knows protection. She believes in faith, he believes in survival. They're two people from different worlds, reaching for each other across a gap neither of them fully understand, and yet Kate isn't naive. She knows who Nico is. She sees the violence, the choices, the contradictions, and she doesn't excuse them. She challenges him to be better, to stop letting pain define every decision he makes. She tells him that revenge won't give him peace, that holding on to hate only feeds a cycle that's already taken too much from them. It's the same advice everyone in Liberty City needs, but she's the only one brave enough to say it without judgment. Kate represents redemption through restraint. She doesn't change Nico's world, she changes his perspective. For the first time, he starts to imagine a version of himself that doesn't need to fight to survive, but that idea terrifies him because peace means stillness, and stillness means remembering. That's the quiet tragedy of their relationship. Kate offers healing, but Nico's not ready to accept it. You can tell he wants to, but he doesn't believe he deserves it. And in a story built on the psychology of coping, that's the most human reaction there is, because sometimes the hardest thing isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving yourself enough to believe you deserve something good. Kate becomes the story's moral compass, but she's also its reminder that redemption doesn't always survive reality. Because in Liberty City, goodness isn't rewarded, it's punished. The world she believes in doesn't exist here. Her faith gives the game emotional weight, because it proves that kindness still matters, even when it can't win. She's the only one who doesn't try to fix Nico's brokenness, she just refuses to see it as all he is. And that's what makes what happens later so devastating. When Kate dies, if that's the path you take, it doesn't feel like a plot twist, it feels like confirmation that in this world, peace was never going to last, that people like Kate can only exist as reminders of what could have been. Her death isn't meant to shock you, it's meant to haunt you, because when she's gone, it's not just her that Nico loses, it's a version of himself he could have become. When Nico finds out that Florian Kravik, one of the men from the war, is alive in Liberty City, he braces for another ghost. He expects another enemy, another person to blame, another chapter from the war that refuses to stay buried. But what he finds instead is Bernie Crane, and that discovery completely changes the meaning of Nico's journey. Bernie isn't hiding from his past, he's transformed it. He's living openly, joyfully, and unapologetically as himself. He's not the man Nico remembers, and that's the point. For Nico, the war is a scar that never healed. For Bernie, it's something that he's accepted, a piece of history, not an anchor. Bernie's story is what happens when trauma stops defining you and starts informing you. He doesn't deny what happened, he's not pretending it didn't shape him, he simply decided it doesn't own him anymore. That's the kind of strength Nico just can't comprehend, because up until this point, his identity has been built entirely around guilt. Every choice, every action, every job, it's all a reaction to pain. Bernie's existence proves that there's another way to live, one that doesn't require self-destruction to feel real. When they meet, it's one of the most disarming scenes in the game. Nico's ready for a fight, but Bernie greets him with warmth. He's comfortable in his skin, vibrant, almost glowing with life. It's not that he's forgotten the past, it's that he refused to let it define his future. That's why his encounter is so important psychologically. Bernie represents identity reconstruction, the process of taking everything that broke you and rebuilding yourself from it, not despite it. It's one of the rare examples in the GTA series of genuine healing. And what's powerful about Bernie's character is that he doesn't fit into the game's usual tone of cynicism or darkness. He's light, genuine light, in a story about moral grayness. But that light doesn't make him naive, it makes him brave. He still carries the same trauma as Nico, but he's learned how to live with it instead of living as it. He's proof that survival isn't the end of the story, rebuilding is. When Bernie tells Nico that he's happy now, that he's moved on, you can see the disbelief in Nico's face. He doesn't say it, but you can tell what he's thinking. How do you live with that kind of past and still find peace? That's the moment where the entire emotional theme of the game crystallizes, because Bernie doesn't give Nico a solution, he gives him an example. He shows that healing isn't about rewriting history, it's about accepting it. It's not about pretending the pain didn't happen, it's about learning to exist without letting it control every decision you make. In a city where everyone is defined by what they've lost, Bernie defines himself by what he's chosen to keep, authenticity. He doesn't fit the city, he doesn't fit the mold, but that's why he survives. He doesn't live by the rules of Liberty City, he lives by his own. For Nico, this is one of the most quietly emotional moments in the entire game. It's not loud or dramatic, it's uncomfortable. Because Bernie's happiness doesn't just challenge Nico's worldview, it threatens it. It forces him to confront the idea that peace is possible. And if peace is possible, then maybe all this violence and revenge he's built his life around was never necessary at all. That realization terrifies him, because for the first time, he sees that healing doesn't require destruction, it requires acceptance. Bernie Crane isn't there to save Nico, he's there to remind him what it means to be human again. When Nico finally finds Darko, there's no music swelling in the background, no cinematic tension, just silence, and that silence says everything. This is the moment he's been waiting for since the war, the reason he came to Liberty City in the first place. The face that's haunted his dreams, fueled his anger, and justified every violent thing he's done, and now he's right there. Broken, shaking, unarmed. But this isn't revenge, this is reflection. Darko isn't the monster Nico imagined. He's not powerful or composed, he's small, pathetic, and completely destroyed by his own guilt. And for the first time, Nico sees what hate looks like after it runs out of purpose. It's not fire, it's emptiness. That's what makes this scene one of the most powerful moments in gaming. It doesn't give you satisfaction, it gives you discomfort. Because this game, GTA 4, understands something most revenge stories don't. Closure doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from acceptance. And acceptance can't be forced through violence. Darko admits what he did. He killed Nico's friends for a handful of dollars, but his confession doesn't bring clarity, it brings confusion. Because there's no explanation deep enough to make the past make sense. There's no reason that can make pain feel justified, and in that silence, the real question surfaces. What is Nico actually fighting for? If you choose to kill Darko, Nico doesn't look relieved, he looks tired. It's not victory, it's confirmation. Confirmation that revenge doesn't fix anything, it just adds another body to the pile. And if you choose to let him live, Nico doesn't look forgiving either, he looks lost. Because even mercy can't fill the void that vengeance leaves behind. He's spent years preparing for this one act, and when it's over, nothing changes. That is the genius of this moment. Rockstar doesn't reward you for morality or punish your cruelty, they just let you sit in it. They force you to face the same emptiness Nico does. It's a psychological mirror. Darko's addiction, his guilt, his brokenness, they're all pieces of Nico, just further down the line. He's looking at what his own future could become if he keeps living like this, and for a brief moment, you can see it. The flicker realization behind Nico's eyes. This isn't closure, it's exposure. He's not confronting his enemy, he's confronting himself. That's why his scene is so haunting, because for once, the player and the character are aligned, both searching for meaning that isn't there. It's the quiet acceptance that there are no clean answers. Some pain just stays with you, and after this point, Nico stops pretending that vengeance is a goal. It's no longer about making things right, it's about surviving long enough to make sense of what's left, but the problem is, there's not much left. Darko's fate doesn't matter, because the real death that happens here is the death of Nico's illusion, the belief that revenge could ever heal him. That's when the game changes completely. From this point forward, every mission, every conversation, every decision carries a quiet finality. You can feel it. The sense that Nico's running out of reasons to keep going, and that's what makes the ending of GTA 4 so devastating, because when you finally reach it, you realize this whole story wasn't building towards revenge, it was building towards understanding. Nico has already lost more than anyone should. Friends, hope, any sense that the future could feel different from the past, but GTA 4 doesn't give you closure. It gives you a decision that feels like punishment no matter what you choose, deal or revenge. Two words that sound like options, but they're really just two forms of surrender. If Nico takes the deal, it feels pragmatic at first. A man choosing survival over pride, but it's not really about peace, it's about exhaustion. He's too tired to keep fighting, so he convinced himself that compromise is a kind of victory. That's what trauma does. It makes surrender look like relief, but the city doesn't forgive compromises. The deal brings money, sure, but it also brings death. Roman, the one person who still believed in happiness, who still believed they could both start over, gets taken instead. It's the cruelest possible consequence because in losing Roman, Nico doesn't just lose family, he loses innocence. That last small spark of hope he had left. And that's the moment GTA 4 shows its full hand. You can make the rational choice, the safe choice, the smart choice, and still end up broken because logic can't protect you from grief. But if you choose revenge, the story plays out differently, and somehow it hurts even more. You kill Dimitri, the man who betrayed you, lied to you, used you, and for a split second, it feels satisfying, but that feeling fades faster than it arrived. Because revenge doesn't erase guilt, it just transfers it. And this time, it's Kate who pays the price. The one person who tried to pull Nico out of this life, the one who saw something good in him when he didn't, gone. Her death doesn't feel random, it feels symbolic. The world isn't punishing Nico for violence, it's punishing him for believing he could live in both worlds, love and blood, peace and vengeance. You can't balance those things. You either leave one behind or lose both. That's why both endings feel hollow, because they aren't about outcomes, they're about consequences. They're about realizing that once you built a life around pain, there's no version of the story where you walk away clean. In both endings, the city stays the same. The lights still shine, the people still move on. The world doesn't stop for grief, it just keeps going indifferent. That's the point GTA 4 makes better than almost any other story I've seen in gaming, that freedom and forgiveness aren't the same thing. You can finish the game, you can bury the ghost, but you can't escape the person you become. Nico stands there in silence, whether he's lost Roman or Kate, and there's no grand speech, no closure, just understanding. A kind of clarity. A tired kind of clarity. Because this whole time, he wasn't looking for revenge or redemption, he was looking for a reason to believe he could change. And in the end, Liberty City gives him the answer. Not through victory, but through loss. It teaches him and the player that peace doesn't come from control, it comes from letting go. When the smoke finally clears, when the city's noises fade for just a moment, all that's left is Nico, standing in the middle of everything he thought he wanted and realizing it cost him everything he actually needed. There's no celebration, no victory lap, just stillness, and that stillness is the entire plot. GTA 4 doesn't end with triumph, it ends with honesty. Because this was never a story about success or revenge, it was a story about survival, and what happens when surviving becomes your only purpose. Nico came to Liberty City chasing a dream that he didn't believe in, and he found exactly what he expected, a world that rewards pain and punishes peace. He tried to rebuild, but he never learned how to let go. He wanted to start over, but he brought all his ghosts with him. That's what makes GTA 4 so timeless. It isn't about crime or money or even morality, it's about people. People trying to live after losing everything that made them feel human. People who build habits out of hurt and call it progress. Every character you meet represents a piece of that truth. Roman teaches you how hope can become denial. Brucey shows you how confidence can become panic. Jacob proves loyalty can be a lifeline. Kate reminds you that love without trust can't survive. Bernie shows that healing doesn't erase pain, it just gives it context. And Darko shows that past never disappears, it just waits. That's why Liberty City feels alive. It's not just a setting, it's the collective psychology of everyone who's ever tried to start over and failed. A city built on coping mechanisms, running on guilt, and shining with the false promise of freedom. And yet, beneath all of that, there's something beautiful, because for all the pain, for all the loss, for all the failure, there's understanding. Nico finally sees it. He can't undo what's been done, he can't erase what he's seen, but he can live with it. Not in peace, but in acceptance. That's what the ending gives us. Not redemption, not forgiveness, just the truth. That sometimes survival is enough. That living with your past is a kind of strength. That the world doesn't owe you healing, but you can still choose it anyways. Because in the end, GTA 4 isn't about the American dream, it's about waking up from it and learning how to live once you do.